The invasion of Poland is usually reduced to a handful of familiar images. German tanks crossing the frontier, Stuka dive bombers overhead, Polish cavalry supposedly charging armored vehicles, and a campaign that appears to have been decided almost before it began. Some of these images are incomplete, others originate in wartime propaganda. Some of these interpretations have survived long after the evidence beneath them was challenged. This series will take a different approach. We will reconstruct the campaign from the surviving operational records, orders, war diaries, situation reports, military maps, and the accounts of the formations that actually fought it. German records will be compared with Polish sources and modern military research whenever possible. The purpose is not to replace one national myth with another. It is to understand how the campaign actually developed, what commanders intended, what the units were capable of, and why events on the battlefield often look very different from the arrows drawn on operational maps. Where the evidence is firm, we will precise. Where accounts conflict, we will say so. And where a famous story does not survive contact with the sources, we will separate the event from the legend built around it. The invasion of Poland is the first campaign we will examine in this way, but it is intended to be part of a much larger project, a military history of the Second World War, built campaign by campaign, alongside future series covering other periods and other conflicts. To understand the fighting that began on September 1st, 1939, we must first understand what the German command expected to happen, and that begins with Fall Weiss. Section 2. Fall Weiss. Case White. Fall Weiss was not the work of a single commander. And it was not a finished blueprint produced in one moment. It developed through several levels of the German command system. On April 3rd, 1939, the Armed Forces High Command, the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, issued the first central directive requiring the Wehrmacht to prepare for military actions against Poland. The operation was to be capable of beginning at any time from September 1st onward. The directive presented Germany as responding to a supposed Polish threat. In reality, it ordered preparations for a war of choice. Its military objective was explicit. The Polish armed forces were to be destroyed, Poland was to be isolated diplomatically, while sudden attacks and rapid victories were intended to prevent the conflict from expanding before the campaign has been decided. Surprise was therefore not merely useful, it was one of the foundations of the plan. Mobilization was to be concealed as long as possible. Active formations could move towards the frontier under the cover of exercises, construction work and scheduled maneuvers. The full mobilization order was to be delayed until the last possible moment. The German leadership wanted to begin the war with its forces already assembled, while Poland was still completing its own mobilization and strategic concentrations. Another quick side fact: this operation was never intended to be a Blitzkrieg. The term Blitzkrieg wasn't really used by the Germans at this time. It was much rather called Bewegungskrieg. And Bewegungskrieg is one of the principal German or Prussian arts of war. The thought behind it was that Germany fighting France, the United Kingdom or Russia will economically always be a step behind them. Russia or later the Soviet Union with its sheer size, and France and the United Kingdom with their colonies. So they came up with Bewegungskrieg, deciding the campaigns fast and rapid, giving the opposition no opportunity to release their full industrial might. Another factor why Case White was not a Blitzkrieg as it's known today was that the tank was not the central role of the attack. It was much more of an infantry mass attack, which was not really the German style of attacking, but Hitler saw it as a test of its weapons. Section 3. The operational idea. The Army High Command transformed the political directive into an operational plan. Poland projected westward between German Pomerania in the north and German Silesia in the south. East Prussia stood beyond the Polish corridor, separated from the rest of Germany. Slovakia provided another approach from the south. This placed Poland inside of a broad arc of German-controlled territory. But geography alone did not guarantee victory. The Polish army could withdraw eastward, trading territory for time and forming a new defensive front behind the Narew, Vistula and San rivers. If substantial Polish forces escaped across the rivers, Germany could face a longer campaign while Britain and France mobilized in the west. The German plan was therefore designed to destroy the main Polish armies before they could make that withdrawal. Two army groups would attack from the north and the south. Their advances were not intended simply to push the Polish front back. They were intended to move around it, divided and close behind it. Where one Polish force would hold out, German forces would push around it, cut its supply chains, encircle it, and therefore make them holding out their own trap. That is called a castle or a cauldron. This logic, as I said, came from the German tradition of Bewegungskrieg, the war of movement. Mobile formations would create penetrations, infantry would widen them and contain Polish forces. Then converging armies would then produce a Kesselschlacht, an encirclement battle in which the enemy was cut off and destroyed. As I said before, this was not yet an official doctrine called Blitzkrieg. It was a campaign built around speed, operational maneuvers and the concentration of force at selected points. The Germans called that Schwerpunktbildung. A point of main effort. Section 4. Army Group North. The northern half of the plan was assigned to Army Group North under Colonel General Fedor von Bock. It controlled 2 armies approaching Poland from 2 different directions. The 4th Army, commanded by Günther von Kluge, would attack eastward from Pomerania. Its immediate mission was to cut through the base of the Polish corridor and therefore restore a direct land connection between the main territory of Germany and East Prussia. This operation would also threaten the Polish formations deployed inside the corridor. If 4th Army advanced quickly enough, those forces could be separated from the rest of the Polish army before they withdrew south. The 3rd Army, commanded by Georg von Küchler, would attack from East Prussia. Earlier versions of the plan placed greater emphasis on waiting until the corridor has been cut. The final operation was much more aggressive. 3rd Army was to begin its attack at the same time as 4th Army. Part of the 3rd Army would strike southward to support the Battle of the Corridor and the crossings over the lower Vistula. Its main force would attack south from East Prussia toward the Narew and Warsaw. Once the corridor operation had been completed, elements of 4th Army could turn southeast. Army Group North would then increase its pressure on Warsaw and help prevent Polish forces from escaping east of the capital. But this northern operation contained 2 distinct problems. The Germans first had to destroy or dislodge the Polish forces in the corridor. At the same time, they had to break the fortified approaches leading south from East Prussia. These missions would produce 2 of the first major battles of the campaign. Section 5. Army Group South. The main German effort would come from the south. Army Group South was commanded by Colonel General Gerd von Rundstedt, with Erich von Manstein as Chief of Staff and Günther Blumtritt as Operational Officer. It was the stronger of the 2 army groups and controlled the 8th, 10th and 14th Army. At the center stood the 10th Army under Walter von Reichenau. This was the principal striking force of Fall Weiss. It contained the largest concentration of German armored, light and motorized formations and would attack from Silesia towards the Polish capital. Its task was not simply to capture ground. It was to break through the Polish armies defending Lodz and Krakow, defeat the Polish reserves before they could assemble and maintain enough speed to reach their routes leading towards Warsaw and the Vistula. To its north, the 8th Army under Johannes Blaskowitz would advance towards Lodz. It would protect the northern flank of 10th Army from the substantial Polish forces expected around Poznan and Kutno. Depending on the situation, it could hold them in place, push them back, or prevent them from striking the German spearhead from the north. At the south of the 10th Army, the 14th Army under Wilhelm List would attack from Upper Silesia, Moravia and Slovakia. It would advance towards Krakow and then eastward, protecting 10th Army from Polish forces in Galicia and threatening the Polish routes leading towards the San and the Romanian frontier. Army Group South would drive northeast towards Warsaw. Army Group North would press south and southeast. If the 2 operations met as planned, the main Polish armies in western Poland would be trapped before they could escape behind the Great River Line. The center of the German front around the Oder approaches was comparatively weak. That was deliberate. Border troops and secondary attacks would attempt to deceive the Polish command and hold Polish formations in place, while German striking power remained concentrated on the 2 wings. The plan accepted the risk of a Polish counterattack in the center in order to create overwhelming strength in the north and the south. Section 6. Air power, sea power and tempo. The ground plan depended on the other branches of the Wehrmacht. The Luftwaffe was ordered to attack the Polish Air Force, interfere with mobilization and prevent Polish reserves from concentrating. It would also support the army spearhead immediately after they crossed the frontier. This did not mean that every German division would receive continuous air support, nor did it mean that aircraft could replace artillery, infantry or logistics. But German commanders expected air attacks against railways, communications, headquarters and moving columns to disrupt the Polish response at precisely the moment when speed mattered the most. In the Baltic, the German Navy was ordered to neutralize the Polish naval forces, blockade the Polish coast and secure the sea route to East Prussia. Particular attention was given to the crossings over the lower Vistula. Bridges were more than tactical objectives. An intact bridge could preserve the momentum of an entire corps. A destroyed bridge could delay the operation long enough for Polish forces to escape. Fall Weiss was therefore not simply a plan for armored movement. It was a coordinated attempt to control time, to delay Polish mobilization, accelerate German concentration, seizing crossings, and prevent the Polish command from forming a stable front. Section 7. The gamble behind the plan. On paper, Fall Weiss offered the German command several advantages. The German forces could attack from multiple directions. Their mobile formations were concentrated on decisive axes. The Luftwaffe could interfere with Polish movement, while 2 army groups attempted to close around the Polish armies west of the Vistula. But the plan was built on assumptions. It assumed that surprise would be preserved. It assumed that the Polish army would defeat far enough west to be encircled. It assumed that German mobile formations could maintain their pace around damaged roads, demolished bridges, and terrain that often favored the defender. Most importantly, it assumed that Britain and France would not intervene quickly enough to threaten Germany in the west. Germany had concentrated much of its offensive strengths against Poland, The Army Group C remained behind the west wall with a large defensive mission. German planners understood that the country was not prepared for a prolonged full-scale war in both east and west at the same time. Fall Weiss therefore had to succeed quickly. The plan was powerful, but it was not automatic. It depended on how Poland chose to defend itself, and the Polish command had no intention of abandoning the western half of the country without a fight.